Hello guys, welcome to MongoDB World 2020, which is being held MongoDB Live on the internet. Well, the reality is awkward. And welcome to my session, True Detective Stories, that will help you to become a debug ninja. So my presentation based on two real life examples from our customers. And I will show you how to take a big problem, divide it to smaller problems, pinpoint the broken piece, and to find the answer. So my name is Zela. I'm part of MongoDB crew since 2019. I am a TSC, Technical Services Engineer, or you can refer to me as a part of the force which you reach out for help when you open ticket. I'm excited about technology, especially the security part. And I'm a happy owner of a mare named Lola, closest thing to having a dragon, by the way. And I have these two small clouds with arrows, so you won't confuse between us. Okay, the motivation for this talk. So as a TSC, I spot same pitfalls and patterns that come back from different customers. So I want to address them in this presentation, and I hope it will help you with your environments and your debug process. So the main motto for this presentation is divide and conquer. Okay, if you have a major and big problem, you would like to break it into smaller pieces to find the broken part or the weak link, and it will be much easier to fix small piece and not to try and debug major and big environment. So my two examples will be about Ops Manager and TLS. So Ops Manager, it's something that's big, complicated environment, different pieces that can break, as well as security, well, in this case, TLS. Chapter 1, Ops Manager, let's start. So before we fix, we might want to break into pieces. This is 4 major parts of any Ops Manager environment. So the web server itself, deployment, agents, there is 3 of them, monitoring, automation, backup, and backups. In fully setted environment, you have 3 agents. If you don't have backups, you will not have backup agent. If you not have automation, you will not have automation agent. Out of the scope, network, hardware, OS, and resources like hardware resources, obviously because it's outside, external to MongoDB. Okay, so we'll start with a warm-up question. You type HTTPS and the address of your web server, and you get this 3-digit number error. Where to look for the problem? Take your time, you can pause and think about it. So the problem should be in the web server. And usually it's not in the application itself, but in AppDB. AppDB is a database where web server stores all of the data related to Ops Manager application, like users, permissions, etc. So you should go to the place the AppDB should run, check if it's accessible, if it's up and running, and the problem or the clue for the problem you may want to find in mms0.log. And here you have the location. You can have this presentation and you have all these slides, so you don't need to write anything actually. In a MongoDB Ops Manager environment, you're allowed to have, or sometimes even advised to have, more than one Ops Manager. This is done for high availability. But take into account, if you complicate your setup, well, more pieces can break and it's more complications. And here is our detective story, number 1. Once upon a time, there was a happy Ops Manager environment and everything worked in a perfect harmony. But an evil twin of the first Ops Manager was created and ruined everything. Of course, we don't get cases like that, unfortunately. But the case that we got looked like this. Everything worked. Another Ops Manager was installed for high availability. Nothing works anymore. Regarding the nothing works anymore, if we get ticket like that, we'll dig and find out which part is not working. So to save time and to get your problem solved more quickly, you would like to specify which part is actually broken. TSC for the rescue. Here we had to eliminate the working parts. Can you connect to MongoDB backing database? And that usually checked by running Mongo shell, connecting to MongoDB deployment, and running command like show DBs. Yes, it works. Okay, one thing works. AppDB is available. Yes, again, you can check it with the Mongo shell. Old Ops Manager available? Surprisingly, yes. Now it's time for go to the right log file, which is MMS0 log of the non-working Ops Manager, and look for the error. The error was pointing to encryption. Okay, the error was not that obvious, but since it's connected to encryption, it was obvious that the problem is in AppDB, because AppDB is encrypted. All data is encrypted there. And what is the encryption key for the AppDB? gen.key. Okay, so the TSC did the following decision. Copy-paste gen key from working Ops Manager to the non-working one. And surprisingly, everything started working. Nailed it. Let's see what was wrong. So that was the original deployment. Everything worked, everything's functioning. Now we are adding another web server for high availability. Both of these web servers supposed to connect to the same AppDB. And AppDB, as we already said, encrypted. And it's encrypted with gen key from the original Ops Manager. So when we are installing the second web server, we might follow the procedure and by mistake generate another gen key, which is of course different from the previous one. That's why the second Ops Manager could not access the AppDB with the, well, not matching encryption key. So the TSC asked to copy-paste the original encryption key, and everything worked. So let's summarize. First of all, TSC narrowed down the problem. He or she eliminated the problem, the working parts, and nailed the problem to the newly installed Ops Manager. And TSC knew where to look for the right log, and the error gave a clue to find the answer, which was the gen key. Nailed it. everything work. Okay, so we talked about web server, the part of the web server and Ops Manager. There is 3 additional parts, which is the deployment, can be replica set, sharded cluster, standalone, whatever you choose in your deployment, agents, and the backups. So I will go through all 3 parts and give you clues what to look and how to narrow the problem in those 3 parts. So if you checked and the problem is not in web server and it's in deployment, you start with, first of all, checking if it's a monitoring. By that, I mean that you can connect to your deployment. It works, it's accessible. You can connect with Mongo Shell, you can run show DBs or whatever additional command you can. You can check if the collections you're expecting to be there are there. Well, you'll manage, I'm sure. So once you're sure that your deployment is up and running, but Ops Manager shows that it's down, or you don't see metrics or another like strange problem like that, it's probably monitoring, and the right place to look is monitoring agent log for the clue and the error. Usually it's network issue. We'll get to the usual problems with monitoring later. After you eliminated the monitoring part, if your deployment is standalone, you need to check if mongodb process is running. If it does not run, well, that's first of all your problem. You can look in 2 places, which is mongodb.log and automation with some extension .log. You can find the clue for the problem there. Can you start the process manually? If you can, and your deployment is under automation, the probable issue is that automation agent cannot start the process for some reason, for example, permissions. So concentrate on automation agent. If you cannot start the mongodb process, well, it's probably some kind of OS issue or permissions issue. You need to check and dig into that further. If the mongodb process is running, well, which is a good news, you should check if you can connect to it using Mongo Shell and run simple command show DBs just to check that you have the right permissions. Okay, if you can run show DBs and it's successful, probably the issue is on upside, and you need to debug this your application. So it may be different things like connection string, network issue, like that. In case you cannot run show DBs, but you can connect using Mongo Shell, it's possible that you have some kind of permission-related issues. To check if mongodb process is running, you can use simple Linux command if you're running on Linux, ps-ef grep mongo, or if Windows, you can check the service. Well, for any OS, it's a different process to check if the process running actually. Okay, so that's for standalone. If you have replica set, actually you have the replica set is a bunch of standalones connected together. Okay, so you will use the standalone debug techniques anyways. What's additional is the secondary primary that you have. So there is a primary. That's the first thing you should check. Does the replica set has primary? If it doesn't have primary, well, obviously your deployment is down. It's not accessible in many ways. Is there healthy members in the replica set? If not, there was a change that affected all the replica set, probably. Example certificates. If yes, you should concentrate on the non-working nodes and debug it as a standalone process. If you have replica, if you have primary in your replica set, which is a good news, that means that you have no downtime. That's why we have replica set for the high availability. You can connect to the working primary, run RS status, see what's up with other nodes, and debug all failed secondaries as a standalone. Sometimes we want to deploy some kind of change in a rolling manner. In this case, if the change fails, that secondary becomes irresponsible. If your replica set has primary, which is a good news, that means that you don't have downtime and your primary accessible, your replica set is accessible, your application can work, your customers do not feel any downtime of the cluster. You can connect to it, run RS status, see what's up with all the nodes, debug all failed secondaries, as we did with the standalone. Usually, not usually, but sometimes what happens is that if you deploy a change in a rolling manner, there is a node that deploys that change. And if the change fails, this node can become down. It will show down or inaccessible. So you may want to roll back the change you just deployed and start again, see what's wrong. That may be also the reason. If you have sharded cluster, so we're getting, the deployments get more and more complicated. There is two additional players to check, which is mongodb and config servers. Other than that, the debug process is not different from a replica set. So check mongodb, check config servers, check that everything up and running, and then go to your deployment, to shards, replica set by replica set, and you can come back to the slides on the replica set and check according to them. Okay? Okay, so that was for deployments. Now we'll talk about agents part. So as I mentioned, we have three agents: monitoring agent, automation agent, and backup agent, in case you have backups. In case the problem is in monitoring and the symptoms are your deployment is up and running, but you don't get metrics, or it shows in the ops manager as down, that might point to monitoring agent problem. So the process may not simply run, or monitoring agent cannot reach all the nodes in the deployment, or it cannot reach the ops manager to update metrics. In some cases, there is authentication problem or TLS problem with certificates. Automation agent, well, your deployment is up and running. You have errors in deploying changes. So the automation agent process can be down. Automation agent can have the wrong permissions, or maybe authentication or TLS problem, can't reach the ops manager side, or did not receive an updated configuration. Usually automation agent, if the deployment is under automation, it affects other agents and in general. Okay, as for backup, so I didn't talk about the backup agent, but in a minute we'll get to it. So backups. Backups are generally a topic that requires additional kind of presentation, so I will not talk about this too much. But if you have a problem with backup, there is two places to look for the logs. So first of all is daemon logs, and second is a backup agent logs. Common problem with backups, everything's set perfectly and backups are set okay and all works, but it's slow, or sometimes it even blocked. It happens because of renaming collection. If your application renames collections constantly, this will slow down backup. Sometimes, in some cases, it will block the backup. So make sure that the application does not renaming collection like constantly, otherwise it will block your backup. In general, for Ops Manager environments, you have the diagnostic archive. To find the diagnostic archive, you can use the Ops Manager UI. In the right upper corner, you click on Admin, go to System Overview, and download tar zip file. Usually, if you open a case which is connected to Ops Manager, we will ask you for this archive. So you can save time by opening a case and attaching this zip or tar to the case. It will just save back and forth communication. It will never be harmful to add this file, okay? It will gives information about the whole environment, and we can start working on debugging your issue. Okay, that was for the Ops Manager. So you know, it may be a good time to take a cup of water or coffee, because we are getting to chapter 2 on security. Okay, so if you took a break, welcome back. Chapter 2, security. So again, we are breaking into pieces before fixing. If you notice, there is the schema is very like the previous one, but I took out the backup security because this is a whole different topic. It has its own complications, and I will not talk about this. In general, if you're talking about security, you need to understand security of what. If you're talking about security to connect to web server, it's one thing. If you're talking about security to your deployment, it's another thing. So if you enable security in your deployment, you need to remember that agents has to connect to your deployment in this secured way that you just set. And the same thing goes for the web server. Agents have to connect to Ops Manager. So if you set security settings, you need to also update the agents accordingly. Okay, so we'll start with a couple of warm-up questions. So first, you issue the certificate with a long host name, but your host uses short name. What can go wrong and how to fix it? Okay, so you can fix it by adding all the short names or additional names of your host to Sun. Just remember that if you're starting using Sun in the certificate, use it for the all host name, including the long ones. Just put in the all list. It can solve this particular problem. Why we might set both TLS and X509? Well, the answer for some people can be trivial, but some people do confuse between these two. So TLS, they have just different purposes. TLS is an encryption at transit, which means it decrypts the traffic that goes back and forth on the network. And X509, it's an authentication mechanism. What they have in common is that they both use certificates. So that part can be confusing. So again, TLS, it's encryption of the traffic on the network. X509 is authentication mechanism. So of course we can enable both of them. Okay, detective story number 2. At first, all traffic traveled freely among the internet, but evil forces wanted to captivate the traffic and steal the data, so TLS, encryption and transit, had to be enabled. In general, for your production systems, TLS is highly recommended to be enabled because you don't want your data to go back and forth on the network without any protection. Of course, the ticket looked differently. We enable TLS, nothing works anymore. Back to this. Where do you enable TLS? The answer was in the deployment. Okay, that's the first step. So they did enable TLS in deployment. Somehow things stopped working. So TSE for the rescue. Debug process. Network okay. The answer was yes. TLS mode. Require TLS. Just small reminder, you have 4 different modes of TLS: disabled, allow TLS, prefer TLS, and require TLS. You're welcome to go to our documentation and see what's the difference between them. But I suggest, if you want to set require TLS, always start with allow. First, allow TLS, check your certificates, and then go to prefer TLS, and then to require TLS. In this particular case, the customer set require TLS without going step by step. What's the problem? Where to look for it? Okay, the problem usually with TLS is certificates. If the network is okay, certificates in 99% of the cases are the issue. What the logs show? This is the error that was found in the mongodb log, and it shows the problem with the PEM file, error parsing, okay? And there is 2 parts in the PEM file, which is private key and the certificate itself. So the private key could be found. That means that there is a problem with the certificate input. So the certificates has to be concatenated in certain order. It's first the certificate, second the private key. Okay, in this case, it was done the opposite way. So I asked the customer to concatenate the certificate again in the right order, and it worked. So that was the problem in this case. Okay, so we've seen 2 different cases on 2 different and complicated topics. One of them is Ops Manager. The second one is TLS. Now I want to wrap up and talk about every tip and trick that you can find here. So before you panic, just a few questions. Which piece is broken? How you do that? Well, all this presentation was about this thing, okay? Just take the big setup, split it to small pieces, look for the broken part, and concentrate on that one. If you don't find the problem yourself, you can always file a case for us and we'll help you. But if you do the narrowing part by yourself, the fixing process will be faster. And the best case scenario, if you also attach the right logs to the ticket as diagnostic archive and the right agent log. You can always ask, what was the last setup that worked? And if you can roll back to it. Sometimes it's what it takes. If your production is down and you want to get it fast back, that may be your solution. Just roll back to the previous setup. Don't panic about the downtime, and just go to your change that you want to perform and see what could go wrong during that change. You have to know where to look for the information, where to look for the errors, where are the relevant log files can be found, as we already seen in the example of Ops Manager. There was MMS0 log, agent logs, mongodb log. In TLS, also mongodb log included the data. So, well, the best way to fix problem is never having them. So for that, you have prevention. Split a big task to small pieces. Apply step by step. This may be trivial, but people tend to get bunch of different things and different changes, and then the debug processes becomes very, very complicated. So just don't be lazy. Apply the changes step by step, check every step at a time, and continue with next one. Always have backups. If your data is valuable to you, please have backups. You have different options to have the backups. You can enable backups in Ops Manager. You can maybe do a dump of the data to a file. It depends on how much data you have, but maybe that's the option for you. Just have your backups in place if your data is valuable. If you're on testing environment, maybe that's okay if you lose the data. That's fine, but on production, always have backups. An additional thing is to have testing environment, and it's supposed to be as close to production as possible. So if your production is huge and you have huge amount of data, like dozens of terabytes, probably you cannot have a testing environment as the same as the production. But if you have a production environment with huge amount of data, which is sharded, take testing environment and also set up it for sharded cluster. Don't have testing environment with standalone and deploy changes on that and then go to your production with the sharded, and well, things can go wrong. So have your testing environment in place, have it as close to production as possible. The last tip is don't mess with security. Sometimes people do things with trying to set up security settings without really understanding what they are doing. Security is very important to protect your system, but it can somehow protect it from you, and you don't want to be in that place. One of the examples I have from my experience is a customer that had encryption at rest with a local key file. It caused a disaster. They lost the local key file, the data became inaccessible and lost. Okay, so they lost all their data. So that's something that can happen if you don't know what you're doing. So please get a security expert to set up the security settings, and please don't set many of them at once. Do it step by step, one thing at a time. Check every single step and stay safe. Okay, guys, so we got to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for being with me for this, well, a bit more than half an hour. It was my pleasure. I hope you find this presentation useful and it gave you, well, expertise of how to work with major problems, how to divide things to shorter, smaller pieces, how to pinpoint the problem, especially based on two examples, the Ops Manager and the TLS. Stay safe, and hopefully I will see you in the next MongoDB World that will be held in New York, and I can see your faces. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.